Tēnā koutou katoa, ko karioi te maunga, te whaingaroa te moana, ko Pākehā te iwi, ko Castle Frank Allen te hapu, ko Ruapuke te papakainga, ko Joe Citizen ahau. Kia ora. Te Maramataka is an undertaking to make an immersive interactive artwork that attempts to make a repository of knowledge about Te Maramataka. At present, our rōpū is a partnership between Wintec and Te Runanga o Kirikiriroa and currently consists of 4 people. We are Te Time About It, Hagen Tautari, Horomona Horo, and Joe Citizen, and this undertaking sees us attempt to traverse both rangahau and research practices. By acknowledging ourselves as a collective rōpū, embarking on a shared endeavour, we can place emphasis on the process of learning about our shared whanaungatanga in order to seek mutually acceptable agreements grounded in the useful. As such, our practice-led collaboration at the intercultural hyphen means that we deliberately walk into the innovation space as we seek to add to what has already been done before. Establishing good whanaunga is not just a feel-good aspect of working together, but emphasises the importance of relationality itself, as it is the relation or connection, not the thing itself, that is ontologically privileged in Indigenous and Māori thought. The decision to wānanga was therefore part of our ongoing processes, and the length of time it takes is as long as is required to come up with mutually agreed goals. Wānanga are quite different to how meetings are typically organised within Western frameworks, in that they are open-ended and relational rather than task-orientated and time-limited. This emphasis on process is critical and must take its own time, particularly when Te Maramataka emphasises the influence of the turning moon phases on our own selves, as well as everything else that is always already going on. Acknowledging the relationality between things means also acknowledging that knowledge itself is experiential, embodied, and performative. How we get there is an important part of the destination there itself. As we navigate between and through these different knowledge frameworks, our practice-led participation must be acknowledged as speculative, as we too help to co-create the relationally emergent phenomena as it emerges. It must be said, however, that intercultural collaborations between Te Ao Māori and Te Ao Pākehā are notoriously difficult for all concerned. What knowledge is and is not, who or what has agency in the world, how and when things happen, and the nature of these relationships in themselves are situated within different culturally informed worldviews. Attempting to make a repository of knowledge about Te Maramataka through an immersive interactive artwork means engaging with these two distinctively different but equally valid knowledge frameworks and their attendant foundational metaphysics. That knowledge itself is culturally predicated is still not well understood by many, as recently demonstrated through a letter to the listener, signed by 7 science professors from the University of Auckland. They claimed that science is universal, and Indigenous knowledge is critical for the preservation and perpetuation of culture and local practices. However, in the discovery of empirical universal truths, it falls far short of what can be defined as science itself. As others have pointed out, science is not universal. It is only one way of knowing. What this episode reveals is a continuing belief in human exceptionalism and Cartesian ontological distinctions between subject and object, as if such distinctions were both self-evident and universal. From this southern side of the planet and our dissimilar experiences of colonialism, universalist claims to truth are nothing new. Indigenous metaphysics has long been ignored under the rubric of a savage philosophy as defined by a lingering racism and evolutionism that motivate distinctions between the animate and the inanimate, the real and the ideal, between signs and things, and ultimately between who matters and who does not. Māori scholarship about non-human agency is, however, extensive, but often it is ignored or avoided by Eurocentric post-humanist scholars who seem more interested in avoiding idealism in contradistinction to realism. It is therefore with some caution that universalist claims arising from new materialism and what has been called the critical post-humanities are greeted. If in general such approaches seek to develop a new philosophy of science and a way to move away from Kant, there appears to be a lack of self-reflexivity with regards to how material realism remains foundational. Acknowledging non-human agencies is far more common in Te Ao Māori, as illustrated by Te Tai Taukato scholar Māori Marsden when he says, "The material proceeds from the spiritual, and the spiritual, which is the higher order, interpenetrates the material physical world of Te Ao Marama." The salient word here is interpenetrates, which provides quite a different understanding of the relationships between materiality and spirituality than those afforded by Eurocentric, Aristotelian, Platonic, Descartes, Kantian metaphysical trajectories. It seems particularly ironic that whilst Indigenous Māori scholarship on the powers of non-human agency has much to offer the critical post-humanities, it has often been ignored because it does not neatly fit into a pre-existing materialist framework. For example, when Braidotti describes her posthuman subjects as a material process ontology on eminence and becoming, or Barad defines agental realism as the universe creating meaning in relation to itself, then they may both acknowledge the entanglement of empirical observations within unfolding phenomena, but only within a material realist framework. Similarly, Bennett's vibrant materialism can discuss how the capacity of things can impede or block the will and designs of humans, but act as quality agents or forces with trajectories, propensities, or tendencies of their own. She seeks, however, to avoid idealist sentiment when she says, "Mine is not a vitalism in the traditional sense. I equate effect with materiality rather than posit a separate force that can enter and animate a physical body." Such understandings are entirely Eurocentric in their binary divisions between tangible materiality and intangibility of ideas, and by extension, spirituality as belief. How this plays out in our practice is not at all straightforward, as each of us come with our own predispositions and experiences. That the Western Academy itself is complicit in the perpetuation of epistemological frameworks that valorize the ontological distinction between representations and that which they purport to represent, presents major challenges to our shared navigation of what data is, how it operates, and our approach as to what we're actually attempting to make. It's one thing to agree that the knowledge of Maramataka experts is situated, embodied, and relational within the life context. But should the modes of the finished work and the approach itself be representational and/or epistemological, or can we avoid this? In Western and Pākehā traditions, data and information is considered abstract and without material form, whilst retaining indexical links to a material reality vis-a-vis Cartesian-informed objectivity and semiotics. In Te Ao Māori, data has agency because it has its own whakapapa. This word has often been translated as genealogy, but as a verb it translates to the laying down of layers in an interconnected manner across time and space. That the whakapapa of data is recognised by New Zealand's Tertiary Education Commission is yet to be fully recognised by those of us working in education. As Western metaphysical traditions have often assumed that measurable data is synonymous with actual phenomena, digitality takes as normal the idea that data is reducible, exchangeable, and subject to the logic of mathematical operations. In other words, a computer computes, that is to say, it's a logic machine. This is quite different to considering phenomena as relational and informed by everything else, both tangible and intangible, also going on. These distinctions are important to acknowledge when considering, for example, the difference between lunar phase predictions from an astronomy website and actual lived embodied knowledge gained from observing how the moon appears in relation to real-time weather and atmospheric conditions. Situating knowledge as relational means that the Maramataka of one region or rohe will not have the same relevance to another. Because it is tribal and was transferred from generation to generation orally and practically, then Maramataka knowledge is hapu specific, and analysing their differences can be useful when considering what might be applicable for local situations. Navigating these tensions between indexicality and performativity is key in our attempt to identify the scope of our project. For instance, should the IT architecture use predicative strategies based on existing data, or use real-time observations from specific locations using machine learning to try and approximate generations of human knowledge? Or neither, or both? Predictive and rules-based strategies rely on probabilistically reductive methodologies, and don't acknowledge non-human agencies or open-ended potentiality. In conclusion, attempting to make a repository of knowledge about Te Maramataka as an immersive interactive artwork means engaging with two distinctively different metaphysical frameworks. Where there appears to be some potential similarities between new materialism and the post-humanities, with the metaphysical frameworks of Te Ao Māori, cannot be taken for granted. It cannot be taken for granted that Eurocentric materialist traditions are universally applicable. Our navigation of these tensions between indexicality and relational performativity is a foundational aspect in identifying the scope of our project. This in turn means that our practice-led participation is relational and part of the emerging phenomena as it unfolds. Kia ora.